Here we go. So we have our other two commissioners joining us. We do have quite a few individuals online viewing and participating hybrid. I would like to announce to those that are online, if you could please raise your hand if you have something to say, and I will unmute. Otherwise, you will remain muted throughout the meeting. Attorney Williamson, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the December 5th work session of the Durham County Board of Commissioners. We're going to start with the public charge. The Board of Commissioners asks its members and citizens to conduct themselves in a respectful, courteous manner, both with the board and fellow citizens. At any time, should any member of the board or any citizen fail to observe this public charge, the chair will ask the offending person to leave the meeting until that individual regains personal control. Should decorum fail to be restored, the chair will recess the meeting until such time that a genuine commitment to the public charge is observed. As a courtesy to others, please turn off your cell phones during the meeting. And again, good morning. As I'm sure you can see, I am not the chair of this illustrious board. However, I'm Larissa Williamson with the Durham County Attorney's Office, and to explain why I am sitting here, the first meeting in December, we hold our elections for our chair and vice chair. And during that meeting is when the county attorney has the opportunity to preside over the meeting for that one specific purpose. So that's why you have me here today. So the first order of business is the election of the chair, and I will entertain nominations for the position.
I'd like to nominate Brenda Howerton as chair.
So Brenda Howerton has been nominated. Do I have a second? A motion? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Are there any other nominations? Okay. So we have the nomination of Brenda Howerton. Madam Clerk will ask for a roll call.
Do we have I'm sorry, Commissioner Alam? Aye. Commissioner Burns?
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Carter?
Aye.
Vice Chair Commissioner Jacobs?
Aye.
All right.
So congratulations, Chair Howerton. And I will gladly relinquish this seat to you. Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you. Before I go any farther, I will address everyone in just a moment, but before I do that, I want to ask for nominations for vice chair.
Madam Chair, I nominate Wendy Jacobs.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? And I got a second. You don't need a second? Okay. So Commissioner Jacobs has been nominated for vice chair. And we can get a roll call, please.
Commissioner Alam?
Aye.
Commissioner Burns?
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Carter?
Aye.
And Chair Howerton?
Aye. So it's been unanimous, Commissioner Jacobs, vice chair. So I just want to thank you by reading. I have a statement, prepared statement I want to read. So first, let me begin by thanking my fellow board members for your vote of confidence in allowing me to continue to serve as the chair of the board for another term. Congratulations to Vice Chair Jacobs. We have had a great team. We've made a great team in the past 2 years, and look forward to continuing progress next year. As we move forward, we will continue to demonstrate our collective resiliency in these challenging times while the COVID pandemic continues. We have learned great lessons about how to keep the health, safety, and well-being in our community as top priority. I will say that this year has been filled with significant accomplishments. In March, we voted to hire Dr. Kimberly Sorrell as our county manager. I am sure you will agree that she is doing an amazing job. Our board approved the county's $794 million spending plan with no property tax increase. The budget included increases for Durham Public Schools, expansion funding for our pre-K programs, more school health nurses, and raises for our dedicated employees. We also funded maternal health nurses, nursing positions to improve our focus on Black maternal health. We used American Rescue Plan Act funding to continue to address COVID-19 relief and more. I'm very proud that our community came together and approved a $550 million bond referendum. This was the largest bond ever placed before our voters. Durham Public Schools, Durham Technical Community College, and the Museum of Life and Science can better address current and future growth in our community. And as we move forward, I am confident that our board will work to support several key priorities, including providing aqua funding for community programs, supporting our seniors and helping them age with dignity, reducing the level of violence in our community, working collaboratively with the city and the private sector to provide more affordable housing for our citizens, the provision of a mental health hub with programs and services by working with churches and others to bring mental health services closer to our residents, increasing access to broadband in underserved communities, and a continued emphasis on reducing Black maternal health disparities and improving the health of their babies. As I conclude, let me say that we have a dynamic board of county commissioners who bring forth passion, energy, and talent to this role. Please know that I am excited as we move forward together to serve our residents and as we continue to tackle the emerging challenges that lie before us. Thank you again for your support. Anything for any of the other commissioners? All right.
Something real quick, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Carter, thank you.
Well, I want to thank you both for your willingness to serve as chair and vice chair. It is an additional responsibility. I know it comes with extra work. I also want to say I think that a number of colleagues on this board would make great leaders, and I'm looking forward to that in the future. And I just really felt like this year it was important to have some stability, continuity. We've had a lot of changes, and thank you for being willing to continue in the role one more year, and look forward to growth of new leaders for the future.
Exciting. All right. So the next item is ceremonial items. So the first one is 220690, approval of the public bonds. The board is requested to suspend the rules and approve the bonds of the following public officials: Sheriff Clarence Burkhead, Sharon Davis, Register of Deed, Dwayne Brunson, Tax Administrator, and Susan Tezard, Chief Financial Officer. And I will entertain a motion to suspend the rules.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we suspend the rules for the matter stated.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second to suspend the rules. Need a roll call from the clerk.
Commissioner Alam,
Aye.
Commissioner Burns,
Absolutely.
Commissioner Carter,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jacobs,
Aye.
Chair Howerton.
Aye. It's been approved unanimously. And next, I will entertain a motion to approve the public bonds.
I'd make a motion to approve the public bonds that have been stated.
Okay, it's been moved and properly second. Roll call from the clerk.
Commissioner Alam,
Aye.
Commissioner Burns, Commissioner Carter,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jacobs,
Aye.
Chair Howerton.
Aye. Bonds have been approved unanimously. The next one, 22070, approval of the 2023 bond of County Commissioners meeting schedule, Board of County Commissioners meeting schedule. Do I need to also suspend the rules for this one? Okay, so I will entertain a motion to suspend the rules.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
been moved and properly second. A roll call by the clerk.
Commissioner Alam,
Aye.
Commissioner Burns,
Yes.
Commissioner Carter,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jacobs,
Aye.
Chair Howerton.
It's been approved unanimously to approve the Board of County Commissioners calendars. Next, we have citizens' comments. This is during this portion of the meeting.
I'm sorry, Chair Howerton, you just suspended the rules. We have to approve the actual count.
Oh, okay, we got to go back.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the board's calendar.
I move to approve the board calendar.
Second.
All right, Commissioner Alam,
Aye.
Commissioner Burns, Commissioner Carter,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jacobs,
Aye.
Chair Howerton.
Aye, approved unanimously. I was moving a little bit too fast there. Okay, so now this is a period to give citizens 3 minutes to share comments to the commissioners and community. Do we have anybody signed up?
No, Chair Howerton, no one has signed up via email, in person, and no one has raised their hand online.
Okay, is it anyone on the call?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll move down to our consent agenda. Commissioner, we have 16 items on the consent agenda, and at this time, the manager will walk through those, and Claudia Hager is filling in for the manager.
Good morning.
Morning.
I will read the items and just look to you to see if you have questions. The first item is 2020-0635, proposed relocation of abandoned McGee Family Cemetery. Next, we have item 22-0656, enter a contract in the amount of $104,000 with Kintech Systems to provide audio visual support for all Durham County conference and courtrooms that contain audio visual equipment. Next, we have an item 220660, approve an amendment of $30,000 to the West staffing contract to continue contracted services of a junior software developer. This would increase the contract to $54,993. Next, we have an approval to renew the county's 3-year Microsoft Enterprise Agreement contract. That's item 220661. The amount of this contract agreement is $1.3 million, and it's in the existing budget. Next, we have item 220674, Greater Triangle Commuter Rail Study Memorandum of Understanding Extension Agreement. Next, we have 220675, Budget Ordinance Amendment Number 23 BCC 0048, Public Health to recognize $2,422 from the Department of, from the North Carolina Division of Health and Human Services, the Division of Public Health Epidemiology Section, and Communicable Disease Branch for TB infection and disease screening. Next, we have 220678, a request to approve amendment to contract with Innovative Interfaces Incorporated. Next, we have 220697, increase the 300 East Main Street Affordable Housing Redevelopment Master Development Agreement through PayGo funding of $1.5 million and loan number 3 to execute amendment number 2 to the Master Development Agreement for the project.
Madam Manager,
Yes.
I did just want to take a second on this item. I don't have a question, so Perry, you ain't got to get up. I want to highlight this one for 2 seconds. Not necessarily pull it, but this board has made it a point to invest in affordable housing, and as you all can see, it has gotten rather costly. I just want to at least thank my board for their intentionality about making sure as these financial gaps continue to arise that we step up to the plate. Thankful to staff for going out there and actually trying to find find the equipment. I know there was a time we couldn't find sinks, but the community is relying on us for affordable housing. On the same street, but we have hundreds of units going up. There are also a 20-story building with $1 million units going up. So I just wanted to highlight for the community that this is something that we've invested in. We're going to continue to invest in, much like Stanford Air Library, much like our schools. So please understand that we're taking the appropriate steps to build better housing options for individuals in this county.
I just wanted to echo Commissioner Burns' comments. One of the struggles we have is just how the reality of building affordable housing, it is expensive for us to do it, and we are committed to doing it. I appreciate, Perry, the information that you have provided to us about the work that is going on collaboratively with our affordable housing developer partner, who is working in good faith with us in light of the challenges right now related to construction, supply chain, and costs. And it also is indicative of just how hard it is to execute these projects. We have been working on this since it's been at least 4 years. Maybe, Perry, am I correct? 2017, okay, 5 years. So these things, they take a lot of time and effort and persistence. I was wondering, Perry, do we know when there might be a groundbreaking? Because we don't normally do groundbreakings like the schools do, but it would be great if we could do a groundbreaking for the affordable housing piece. Do you know when that might be?
Commissioner, we had talked about that previously, and the last time we talked about it, you had requested sort of an opening ceremony as we transition from the construction of the deck to the affordable housing. And we're still working to do some type of ceremony to acknowledge that commencement. Right now, as you know, the deck is real close to completion. We have one little utility conflict out in Queen Street that we're working with city-county inspections on. And then we're also working diligently with county staff to bring the security and parking access and revenue control system online, which will allow us full operation of the deck. Again, based on this amendment, the construction of the affordable housing will start, let's say, January, February. And so we should be timed appropriately to have some type of ceremony around January. Hopefully, if we can work out these few final issues with the completion of the deck. So that's our intent. We're still focusing on that. So stay tuned.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome.
Commissioner Carter?
Yes, I would have asked this question via email, except I didn't get through the consent agenda until late last night, so I apologize for that. But I had someone reach out to me last week about basically every county building we build from now into the future, and just wondering if these two, the 300 and the 500 Main Street, if we are, and I just don't remember, if we are able to have capability for rooftop solar, and if we are already, or if that could be added in with additional costs, I know, but just curious where we are with that.
Yeah, and so, good question, Commissioner Carter, and the short answer is yes, but let me tell you how we're doing that. On the 300 deck, we provided the infrastructure, that's the conduit or the raceways up to the roof to allow for future integration of the solar photovoltaic system that you're referencing. And so we have that standardized in both the 300 and 500 deck. Obviously, that's separate and apart from the housing. And so that's our intent there. That's what we're focusing on. And again, as you're fully aware, Tobin is working on, sustainability is working on bringing in a renewable energy plan online. And obviously, that plan or that strategy will sort of outline the timing, the phasing, costs, things like that, of sort of when we can implement some of these sustainable initiatives that the board has sort of urged us to push or to get on our facilities. And so, again, we'll have more to come once we sort of flush out this renewable energy policy and plan. But that's our thinking right now. So.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Next, we have item 220700, Durham County Sheriff's Office contract approval with E+ Technology, Inc. in the amount of
$185,088. General Manager Hager, I just had one question about, I think this is a great idea. I'm wondering, is this being done in coordination with our IT director and IT department? I just wasn't sure how everyone was working together from
Yes.
the way the item was presented.
Commissioner Jacobs, yes, that's correct. Departments may facilitate a project, but they have to coordinate with our IS&T department in order to connect to our network and other systems. But great question.
Great, thank you.
Okay, the next item is 220709. This is a budget ordinance amendment to appropriate general fund restricted fund balance totaling $1.3 million to increase expenditure authority for cooperative extension, social services, library, criminal justice resource center, and the youth home. This is a technical item that we do each year once we close out the previous fiscal year.
Claudia, would you, just for the public's knowledge, would you say a little bit more about that? I have all of the information here and I've read through it, but just for the public, would you explain that a little bit?
I'll have David to walk through highlights on this item. The budget team worked with finance to finalize this information.
Thanks, General Manager Hager. Just to be clear, Chair Harrington, did you ask for specifics or just the overview of the item?
Just A little bit more of a clarification and overview for the public.
Sure, sounds great, thank you. Good morning, Commissioners and General Manager Hager. This item is an annual item that we do. When the county receives funding that's specifically allocated for certain items, whether it's grants or other items from intergovernmental, state, or federal government, those items are considered restricted. We can only use that money to pay for those very specific things. So in this case, what happens is we've received those monies in previous years, and they are held by the county in what's called fund balance, savings account. And in this case, those monies, because they're restricted for purpose, we consider them restricted by the ACFR, working with the finance department, and those funds are then made available the next year to be able to be spent by the departments. This is a nuance around grants don't live in the fiscal year system, right? Sometimes you get a grant for 2 or 3 years, but our county operates on an annual operating fiscal year. So this is a way that we technically bridge that gap of the disparate timeframes.
Commissioner Carter.
I love fund balance questions. I feel like I continue to learn more every year about them. In general, when this happens, I know it's an annual sort of technical kind of vote that we'll be taking. Are there any restricted funds remaining that could be reassigned going forward, or do we reassign all of the funds that were in the restricted fund balance that are unspent?
That's a fabulous question and a very good technical question. The answer is the finance department and the departments work to identify all restricted funds across the county. And then after that reconciliation is done, our office, in coordination with finance, work with the departments to decide how much money they may need that year. So let's pretend a department has $1 million in restricted fund balance, but they don't see the need to spend but $200,000, or the grant only really wants them to spend $200,000. We would only identify $200,000 to add to the expense capacity this year, leaving more money for future years.
And it has to be set aside and restricted
For that
within
purpose.
that same grant area still. It's not like we can take it, oh, we didn't need it all for this grant. Good, now let's put it towards affordable housing or whatever, right? We can't do that. It's still restricted.
Yes, that's exactly right. Restricted funds are restricted.
Freed up.
Yeah, restricted funds are specifically and solely for that intended purpose. I'll delve into a little bit of finance here, but I won't go too far into it. There's at least two different kinds of restricted and committed. Restricted is by the way we receive the money. A grant restricts the funds to only be spent on the grant. Committed fund balance is committed by board policy. So the board has a handful, like Article 40 and 42, by board policy is meant to go to the capital financing plan. The board can change that policy, so my guess is those funds could be reallocated. But in restricted cases, they're only allowed to be spent on those specific purposes.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Thank you, David.
Okay. The next agenda item is 2020-0710, Holland Industrial Services Contract Amendment for the Triangle Wastewater Treatment Plant. Next, we have a budget ordinance amendment number 23, BCC 50, transferring $2.7 million from Human Services functional area to the general government into the environmental protection functional areas to support ongoing general services, vehicle purchase, and county administration operating needs. This is a technical adjustment. Typically, when we need additional dollars, we appropriate fund balance reserves because we do have those reserves for that purpose. During the budget development process, oftentimes we may tighten up budgets really tight in the development process, and sometimes those final numbers are not what's needed based on changes in the landscape, whether it's for now, for instance, general services, inflationary expenses, and there were some other unforeseen areas. And so versus doing a fund balance for appropriation, we're realigning dollars, which is our best practice.
Sorry. Thank you for that context, General Manager Hager. Could you give us some context, David, about this amount? And I know some of it is related to COVID and everything, supply chain, but this amount and within historical amendments and just kind of what is, I guess one of the thoughts I had was, what does this mean for when we start working on our new budget?
Right.
How does this, what implications are there for our budget next year? So just.
And David, I'll start,
Please.
and then I'll let you pick up. One, right now, as you know, they're projecting inflationary increases are tough for many of our capital-related projects, general services projects. Those prices are coming in higher than we expect. The item that you just approved related to the 300 and 500 block is a pure reflection of the market changes. So as we go into the next budget year, we will see what those patterns are, recalibrate based on 12 months of history, but knowing we're in some unprecedented times. And so with that, the base budget will be higher, so we'll start off higher in some areas. For those one-time expenses, we'll, of course, adjust for that. But for those areas that we're seeing 12 months of certain patterns, et cetera, and we can't absorb it in the budget, we will first try to see if we can't realign within the existing budget. And general services, probably of all budget departments, have realized more realigned budget reductions than any department in the last 5 years. And so we will know they'll have a slightly higher base budget. Yeah.
Thank you, General Manager Hager. I don't know that I could set it much better. The only piece I'll add is you hear Keith and I talk a lot about on the revenue side. We're trying to predict back in February and March, we're trying to predict revenue when we don't have a complete fiscal year revenue for the year before yet. So you're trying to predict like 18 months out. This is similar to what happens in the budget process. We took vehicle projections and vehicle requests. General Services worked during the fall of I'm going to get my years wrong, 2021. So almost 2 years ago for this current budget year. And what happens is, we all know inflation really hit hard. So we're working on numbers that haven't always been updated for the current inflation. So what happened for vehicles in particular this year is a great example. No one can buy vehicles at this point. Supply chain is making them hard, and they're coming in at 10 to 15% higher than we had budgeted, because when we were doing the budget development, inflation hadn't hit so hard. Similar, and I won't speak for Motrio on her area, but I think the security contract is another good example. The security contract, when you budget it with a little bit of increase maybe, but all of a sudden when it actually comes in, you kind of have to go with what the market drives. And that's what these numbers are. And exactly like General Manager Hager said, the new budget's going to have to reflect some of these, and/or some very tough decisions are going to have to be made before it becomes a manager's recommended budget.
Commissioner Carter.
I understand all of what you're saying. It makes really good sense. The increased costs, in the areas where we're reallocating the money. But I also am just troubled because it seems like, gosh, if ever we've had increased costs, increased needs, in human services, it also is now during the pandemic. And so are there certain areas within human services where we didn't spend $3 million where we could have? And so that's why we have this surplus?
Well, and let's keep it in perspective. The budget, I think from a spending perspective, we are pacing similar to prior years, but each year we underspend by about 7%, or about between 5 and sometimes higher. And that could be due to a lot of things. Supply chain issues, so you couldn't get the goods in, so your orders didn't come in as quickly. There's just lots of different factors. Unfilled positions, I mean, right now our positions being unfilled is at 20%. So when you look at functional areas, the human services function has the largest number of positions. And so there, it's a nuanced question, a great one, but in the context of a $700 million budget, it's a normal pace in how we're seeing expenditures out. And it's also on the general government side of the house, we do activities for the whole enterprise, but we have very little flexibility. So although general services budget may have gone up, it's paying for utilities for all the buildings. Same with some of the activities, for instance, in the county manager's office, is for enterprise-wide type activities. And so there aren't just those kinds of flexibilities to cover it. If it were to happen in human services where you have most of our vacancies to help cover, that could cover that. At the end of the process, it levels out. We would be very concerned if across the whole organization we were seeing those patterns. Some of these are some anomalies because they're sort of one-time kinds of adjustments, but we will keep a pace on things. And David, did I misrepresent anything there?
No, sounds good.
That makes really good sense. I think I'm always looking for more money to be spent on the unlimited needs it feels like we have. And so when I see this, I thought,
Yes.
I might have wanted to spend it on.
Right,
But
exactly.
I see, but I get it. Anyway, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Thank you. We got 3 more items, and then
The next item is 220712, machinery and equipment repair contract amendment with Alpha Laval, Inc. The next one is 220713, Carolina Management Team, LLC, contract amendment for painting and coating services. The next one is 220714, contract amendment for DPA Hydro Structures, PA Duke's Root Control, Inc. for Utilities Division. And the final one is 220728, Environmental Enhancement Grant Memorandum of Understanding.
thank you, General Manager Hager. If we have lots of other questions, we can get emails to.
I don't have a question.
Quick, Wendy, 'cause
I don't have a question. I couldn't let that item go without acknowledging Ryan Eves sitting here and all of the staff that worked on this amazing project, the Neal School Rehabilitation Project, and what it exemplifies in terms of collaboration with Durham Public Schools, soil and water, cooperative extension, and also education of our students. And I'm wondering if I hope we'll consider doing a press release about this, because this is something to really celebrate and make sure the community knows about. So thank you, Ryan.
we can talk to Deborah about getting something out, but later. We want to move on. We've got guests today, and we really don't want to keep them any longer than necessary. So the discussion items, 220698, Sheriff's Office Project Safe Neighborhood Presentation. This is a 45-minute presentation. The board is requested to receive a presentation from the Sheriff's Office and the U.S. Attorney's Office, Middle District, and North Carolina regarding Project Safe Neighborhoods. And I will ask Sheriff Burkhead to do the introductions, if you will.
Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you all very much. Let me take a moment of personal privilege and thank you for approving my bond this morning so I can be sworn in for a second term this afternoon. So thank you. And thank you for giving us this opportunity to come before you to present Project Safe Neighborhood. PSN has been around for a number of years, excuse me, and we are excited to be bringing this initiative back to Durham. And I say back because some 20 years ago, we had a very successful program running under the city police department at the time. And so I think now, with all that we are experiencing in Durham County as it relates to violent crime and gun violence, now's the time to bring back Project Safe Neighborhood. I have with me this morning the expert, world-renowned Mr. Rob Lang at the U.S. Attorney's Office. Rob has been doing this business for a very long time. I won't date him. I'll let him do his own introduction. But we have an excellent relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office. U.S. Attorney Sandra Harrison has committed her full resources and support for this program. Rob will talk more about that in just a moment. But what I want to say as part of an introduction is this is about saving lives. This is about saving lives. We are losing far too many young lives in Durham to gun violence, and we have to take every step possible and use every tool in our toolbox to address this issue. Now, PSN is not a magic bullet. It's not a end-all, be-all, but it is a step in the right direction. It is a proven strategy that has been employed all over the country. And we'll talk a little bit about the 4 pillars, but this is not a sheriff's office initiative alone. I certainly want to lead this initiative and get everyone to the table, but it's going to take partnerships with the Durham Police Department. Chief Andrews and I have already had some conversation. We did a joint city-county presentation earlier this year. It's going to take the DA's office partnering with us, and certainly it's going to take the community, because this is a community initiative working alongside law enforcement and elected officials to make a difference. So I'll pause here for just a moment and allow Rob to do a presentation. We will leave time to answer any of your questions, and then we'll wrap up. Thank you. Mr. Rob Lang.
Thank you, everyone, and for allowing me to be here this morning. It's good to be back in Durham. I worked here prosecuting cases in federal court for about 10 years, about 15 years ago. And I've been meeting periodically with the crime cabinet and the mayor's roundtable against violence. Gudrun Palmer and the Criminal Justice Resource Center. I come down there, the local reentry council. We've done some reentry simulations here. Done a lot of things in Durham. Love Durham. I love the way it looks. I went to the sheriff's office. I went to the county building. I didn't realize you were going to be here. And I got to walk up through, although I've been to DPAC for a couple things. But it was really nice on a nice morning stroll. So I bring greetings from Sandra Hairston. She is my boss. She's the United States Attorney for the Middle District of North Carolina. She's 31 years in our office, appointed by President Biden. Actually, she celebrated her 1-year anniversary as her official position about 2 weeks ago. Sandra is an unusual appointment by President Biden. Usually it's a little bit more political, but she got it by merit. And you are in a good stead with your United States Attorney. She has forged a relationship with D.A. DeBerry. They are on the same page. We've had some trainings with D.A. DeBerry and many discussions, and we're very excited. Of course, Chief Andrews has been involved in all this, and the sheriff has led the way by facilitating some of these meetings. But Sandra is one of 93 United States attorneys across the country. She goes through the same process that a Supreme Court justice goes through with the advice and consent of the Senate. For some reason, somebody had some pretty strong political power, and we have 3 United States attorneys in North Carolina: Raleigh, Mike Easley Jr., Dina King in Charlotte, and they are, and along with Ms. Hairston, and I've been in the department for 25 years, over 25 years. I've never seen the 3 districts get along the way we are getting along. Just as an aside, I did a similar presentation to the chair of the county commissioners. at the request of Mike Easley Jr. Last June, and Raleigh is reinvigorating its Project Safe Neighborhoods effort and rebuilding its task force to reduce violent crime. So Project Safe Neighborhoods, the outcome, the goal is to reduce violent crime, to prioritize all resources across the continuum: community, clergy, social service, schools, law enforcement, probation, prosecution, at the few that are making it unsafe for the many. And we've been doing it since 2001 in the Department of Justice. We did it well here. We actually started it here, and you might remember Durham Stars. It was our third site. We did it under a precursor to Project Safe Neighborhoods in the late 90s, in 99 and 2000. And actually, some of the lessons we learned right here in Durham were merged into the national Project Safe Neighborhood strategy, which was introduced. It has become apolitical. It has survived. It went in under Bush #2. It really started in Clinton's administration, at the end of the Clinton administration. Then Bush 2, then President Obama put his stamp on it. Then Trump changed it some, and Biden has taken and reorganized it a little bit. But the core pieces of using data, using partnerships across the continuum in the violent crime arena still survive. So, but it is about violence reduction. And I know the data in Durham is similar to the data in Greensboro and Winston-Salem, which are our two other sites. We have 11 other sites in the district. We have sites in Alamance, in Cabarrus, in Winston-Salem, in Greensboro, in High Point, in Davidson County, in Lee County, in Randolph County, in Rowan County, in Rockingham County. But Durham would be our 12th site. It would be our third site, now reinvigorated as our 12th site. We are in the process of reinvigorating all our sites. We are starting over in Greensboro. Greensboro is a recipient of a public safety partnership grant. I would advise you to look into that. Getting a couple $1 million from the Department of Justice and access to some of the best evidence-based programming for violence reduction going on right now. So let me tell you a little bit about, I believe in this. I've been prosecuting for 32 years. I was in the district attorney's office for 7.5 years in Forsyth County. Before I came to the United States Attorney's Office, I was in private practice for 5 years before that. And I believe, and I can say this honestly, I believe that God put me on this earth to do this work. I think everything I've learned in my whole life has helped facilitate and put these partnerships together so we can reach consensus on what we're going to do, and then to have the focus and follow through to do it. And we have had unbelievable success here, in other urban areas, in Greensboro and Winston, but 2018, 2019 were not good years. High Point was our model. High Point was the darling of the country. The High Point model is called for focused deterrence policing, which was invented by David Kennedy back in the mid-90s. But we lost a little bit, but High Point has redoubled their efforts, and now they are starting to chip away. The last I saw, they're 14% down from last year, and last year they were 7 or 8% down from the year before. That's not the trend we're seeing in our urban areas in North Carolina or across the country. So I really feel that when we work together and we concentrate our efforts on the small group, that we can have a great deal of success. You have the structure already. You had the structure 20 years ago. The structure of having an executive level team of the chief, of the sheriff, of the head of probation, of the district attorney, of the school board, of all the pieces are already there to oversee a strategy and have decision makers that can remove the barriers so the mid-level folks and the frontline folks can get the job done. You also are rich in your data. You have data, maybe too much data, but the data can inform us in an objective fashion. And the changes since, it's been 11 years since we did this here. Think about where your crime has gone in the last 11 years. There's a lot of pieces to Project Safe Neighborhoods. Some of it's this face-to-face discussion or with convicted felons, and people come back from the prison. And a lot of people think that that notification process is what Project Safe Neighborhoods is. It's not. That's a piece of it. That's an intervention piece of it. But the power of what Project Safe Neighborhoods is the work to get and identify that small group of people that are doing the most damage, that are toting the guns, that are getting our kids. And what we find out every single place, in the most recent data we did it down, in Salisbury and Rowan County, and we found out in that whole county, after an exhaustive work by University of North Carolina, Greensboro, that there were 75 people that were really driving the train. We're in the process of that at Greensboro. We're estimating around 300 people in Greensboro that are really the dangerous people. And what it is because I carry a gun, I'm one of those people, and the sheriff has to carry a gun, is not really willing to use it, but he's afraid of me. And so he's armed at all times. And these situations go bad in a hurry, and we get into beef, and we have this access to guns, and we have the drive-bys, which are very difficult to solve. Our solve rates on drive-bys are not very good anywhere. But when we work together and we identify, so all that work, though, all the work to identify that small group, when we identified these 75 people in Rowan County, we were going through the list, and they said, John Jones. And I said, I know John Jones. I prosecuted John Jones down here in a criminal enterprise 16, 17 years ago. They said, oh, no, that's his son. Then we went down another one, and it was Fred Smith. I said, well, I know Fred Smith. He was involved in that shooting at the bank where we had to prosecute on a bank robbery. Oh, no, that's his son. Then we went down. I'm telling you, 5 people out of that 75 were juniors. We had already prosecuted them, and we knew that we know the numbers out there, 48%. If I go to prison, one of my 2 boys is going to prison. It's 48.6%. That's a study that was done in the early 1900s. It was done in the 50s, and it's been done 10 or 15 years ago. The number has never changed. It's always been in that same area. So that's the highest risk factor as a parent that goes to prison. So what we've layered in this round and what we're working on in Orange County next door, and Bishop Glover, who's doing some work here as well, is to work with the children of those violent offenders and to try to attack that generational violence in a more intentional way, so that when we put Fred Jones Jr. in jail for shooting, we have to have some accountability for people that are shooting each other. We throw our resources at the third like nobody's business, so that 5, 8, 10 years from now, we're not dealing with Fred Jones III. And if we can spin off, and this group dynamic that's going on here in our urban areas, and our semi-urban areas, and even in our rural areas in our district, in the 24 counties we cover, that spinning of the wheel of those young people. When I was that age, I made stupid decisions, just didn't have a gun. But that wheel that's spinning, and if we can pluck a couple of those kids off, and you have the people here and the programming that understand this population and these young people, and we can do a better job of figuring out how can we disassemble that. I know you're working on it right now. I'm going to give you all kinds of credit, all the things that you're trying to do down here, because I'd like to learn a little bit more about some of them. Project Build, we've tried to replicate in Winston-Salem. Your gang reduction strategy, we're trying to replicate it in Winston-Salem. We have the same kind of meeting structure going on with your steering committee. So, this is not throwing any darts, because we're all in a mess here. But I truly feel, and I've seen it in Cabarrus County, the bedroom community of Charlotte, we have held the line through all these bad years. 63% reduction in Part 1 crime. That's shootings, aggravated assaults, homicides, and robberies. We've held the line through the 2018, 19, and 20, those tough years, through COVID. I don't know how they've done it. Well, I know they have done it. It's been incredible. I keep on saying people talk about Omaha, Nebraska. People talk about Denver, Colorado, some of these success stories across the country, and they're talking 30 and 40% reductions that they've held. I feel like Cabarrus County is the strongest violence reduction partnership in the nation. It's sustained that for years. And they've done it by having a strong executive team and a commitment and a memorandum of understanding between the sheriff, the DA, the chief, the head of probation, and somebody from the community. Local reentry council, I'd suggest here. You know, somebody from the gang reduction steering committee. You have so much going on here, but we have to pull it together and get some focus. So PSN is about focus. It's about follow through. It's about getting the job done. When I was doing this, when I was named PSN coordinator in 2001, this line would have been Rob Lang. There was nobody else in our office that did it. I did it on my own. I did it while prosecuting cases. Didn't have 12 sites, but it has grown. We have an entire team in our office now that has done this, that is involved in this, from the top person to their chief deputy, to the criminal chief, to our law enforcement coordinator, to our intelligence analyst. We're working together to put out a better product because we've learned so much from the various sites. So, you know, here's the sites. So under the Trump administration, Project Safe Neighborhoods was modified. Community engagement was the number 3 piece of the strategy, and they just flipped community engagement and strategic enforcement. Because the strategy itself, it's sound, it's poking, and we'll get through to that to the wheel diagram at the end. But we have involved in that. If you look at number 4 there, University of North Carolina Greensboro has been our research partner for 20 years. We've had that same team for the last 12 years, and they understand this. They also work in the East. They also work in the West. They're a good link. They'll be at a meeting in Raleigh, and they'll say, boy, there was a good presentation, and we'll bring that presentation to the Middle District. So, but it's about putting all these things together. And so here's the 10 steps, and really why I'm here. The research, they did a research on about 14 years of PSN. Michigan State did a project, and they found the findings of this research was where you have a strong coordinator, you get strong results. Where you have a medium coordinator, you get medium results. And where you have no coordinator, you get some results, but you don't get these bigger reductions. So that makes sense, because what happens in this is the sheriff tries to assign somebody, and it's usually a go-to person, and they wear about 27 different hats. And so they don't go to this meeting and say, hey, I'm thinking about what can PSN do? What can the strategy do? How can I improve the training module? How can I find that resource provider over on the west side of town that needs this? Because you're coming in with tunnel vision. So the correlation between strong coordination and the outcomes it's evidence-based. And it's also common sense, like a lot of these things. But that person needs to be dedicated to this project. They need to attend the local reentry council meetings with that hat on. They need to sit in the crime cabinet and hear what the leaders are talking about. They need to be at the gun screenings with the district attorney's office and ATF officers and the United States Attorney's Office. We have models for that position. You've had people here before that have had that position, but we've learned a lot. We got to establish. We used to never have MOUs. We didn't ever have an MOU in Winston-Salem. We never had one in Greensboro. We never had one here. In the other 9 sites, we have MOUs. We learned that everybody needed to put some skin in the game, and that everybody needed to establish what those responsibilities are. I will send my point of contact from the sheriff's office to this meeting that occurs every month to talk about the most violent people that we understand. I use the funnel analogy. The whole world of criminals up here at the top of this massive funnel. But down here at the bottom, this is who we really care about. Those are the ones that'll shoot you in a minute. And those are the ones that are shooting others, and then others are shooting back. That's what we're worried about right here. So we want to get that MOU so that we can get some follow-through. Part of the issue I've seen through the years and is in some of the larger cities, there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of problems. There's a lot of things for us to address. And so sometimes we address we're looking at this violence, but all of a sudden something happens over here, and we move over here, and we start working here, and we forgot. And we never let this strategy take shape, never let it get legs, never got to see the success. Because it takes, it's going to take 12 to 18 months for this thing to bear fruit. We're going to have it's going to take us 6 months to put it together here. You have a jump on it because you have some of this meeting structure. We don't have to create things. But so it takes a little time, and so we want to stay on that focus. We want to work on some training. We've done some training down here. As soon as we started talking about with the sheriff, he said, come on down. We came down. Did some specific training for guns. Treat gun seizures like a murder scene, because it's that very gun that may kill the next individual out there. All the advances in technology and forensics with the shooting, when they changed fingerprint cards, when everybody had to have a fingerprint excerpt, and you had to make a copy of that card and send it to Tuscaloosa, to see if that was the same guy. When they were able to automate that on a computer and have that print go through and have the computer read it and make that match, that changed the world of law enforcement. Similarly, you've had NIBIN here, National Integrated Ballistics Information Network, here for years. And that makes an image of a fired shell casing, and you could compare them through a computer algorithm. It goes down to experts down in Mississippi somewhere, and they send it back and say, this shell casing that you seized over here was also shot from the same gun, one over here. Those advances in technology can help us identify the people at the bottom of the funnel. That training is critical. If you go to number 5 there, building this infrastructure. This is why you need a coordinator. You have to have a coordinator. When I was taught by this lady who was a newspaper editor, one of the smartest and hardest working people I've ever met. And she said, it's about, I only get one chance to talk to you. If I blow this, he's not going to be able to use his chits to get me back up here. When we have an opportunity to talk to our decision makers, we got to be ready. We got to have our act together. You only get one swing of the bat, and many. So we have to build the infrastructure, these executive teams, the advisory teams, the work group. Many of those things you really already have. One of the things you don't have, we used to do the recurring screenings where we looked at violent cases, we discussed them, prioritized them, made decisions about were we going to spend some money on DNA, were we going to do some follow-up interviews, all those types of things. And we don't do those. We used to do them. We did them here well. We did them here well for a long period of time. But you have to have that coordinator to set those agendas, to keep those minutes, to send out the information on the follow-up and follow-through, showing that things are getting done. I'm telling you right now, we have reshaped all of this in Winston-Salem, and we have a meeting that occurs every month. That's called the Chronic Offender Meeting, and it is a meeting that the agenda is set by an objective algorithm that identifies people based on their capability for violence, their violent acts they've done before, the group and gang affiliation, and it's based on the Tampa Violent Impact Player Program, which is an evidence-based. It's been analyzed by University of South Florida. I can get that information if anybody cares. But we're trying to model that, and that meeting is all about talking only about the people on the bottom of the funnel. We don't really care. Unfortunately, right now, with COVID, with the backlogs in the state, with places having 100 murders pending, people sitting in the jail waiting for their trial date, we really talk, and we're really making some hay, and it's building the partnership in the law enforcement arena. So we analyze the data. You have unbelievable data, as I said before. We have the research partner. The beauty of having University of North Carolina at Greensboro is, number one, they've done it a whole bunch of times in a bunch of different places. But number two, they have their own ethical guidelines and their own standards to report. I have had a couple incidents in the last 25 years where they have called and they say the such and such doesn't want us to report this because it doesn't look good. And they're like, what do we do? I said, hey, come on now, that's what you're hired for. If it looked good or bad, we need to know the truth, because we can't get to pillar one, community engagement, if we are not telling the citizens the truth. if we are not telling them what's going on out there in an accurate and complete way, we can't engage them. We can't build trust with them. We can't begin to engage them and have them help change the norms on the street that allow some of this to go on. So we look at the cases in the DA's office. And this analysis goes into this regular group and gun screening for the law enforcement group. We usually start and look at some untouchables. We look at people in the sheriff's office or the police department, oh, you'll never get Johnny Jones. Well, maybe we will. Maybe we got that money machine up there that we just crank out a few more dollars, and what always helps us is greed. Greed helps us make cases on high-value folks that are dangerous. Then we engage all the people that you already have engaged. So going down to the community college, up in Rockingham County, we have these face-to-face things where we talk to people that are at risk at the bottom of the funnel and tell them, you've got XYZ record, you're a habitual felon under state law, you're going to go to federal prison if you pick up a gun for 15 years. But we say, but look, on Friday, we're having a job fair at the community college. The community college, it's a much smaller scale, but they're offering scholarships to these guys, to the people at the bottom of the funnel. And we're having probation officers and post-release officers, if they're going to make a call that day, they're making it on this guy, not somebody over here, so we can get our benefit all across the board. You have all these things, times 5 and 6 in some instances. We did a study in Winston-Salem a number of years ago about parenting programs. That's a problem. We have a problem. There's a problem with parenting of some of the children in our communities. There were 7 parenting programs in play that the court system could refer to. None of them had ever been evaluated, not one of them. We didn't know whether they worked. We didn't know. It was just like throwing money in the wind. We didn't know if we were having any success. PSN is about accountability and follow-through and follow-up and evaluation to make sure that everything that we do is the best for this city. A lot of the things will be just grabbing what you got and bringing it in the fold because you got some evidence-based. Project Build's evidence-based success. We just need to, we wish we could quadruple it or times 10. So we bring it all together. We get new stakeholders. We find these people. We find people that are on the ground. And they're everywhere. And there's tons of them here that have been working out in the field, that have a passion for mentoring or trying to help kids, but they're not really good at writing grants, or they're not really good at filling out time cards or putting down that they made 16 visits this week, and these are services. They're not very good at documenting what they do. So our coordinator helps them, and we do that for them. So that when it's time to apply for a grant, we have the data that this program does X, Y, and Z, and here's the data to support that. Because sometimes our folks out in the field, they're just not, they have the passion. They turn their retirements in to do some of this work. They work in the plant their whole life, and then they turn over their retirement to try to help the population that needs the help. Well, we got to help them. We got to build their capacity. I know you identify them when you give them grants. I know you do. I know you are. But that's what we try to do. And when we bring them in the fold and we give them the good data and we point them in the right direction and we have our officers and deputies on the street that can make referrals to vetted, motivated, accountable programming, if we do that over and over and over and over, we're going to start chipping away. We make sure we keep you in the loop. My goodness. We're going to probably ask you, I think the sheriff's going to ask you to write a check. We're going to make sure we keep you in the loop. We're going to make sure that we tell you what's going on. And, there's multiple meetings. We don't have to reinvent the wheel down here. You got plenty of meetings where this can be a 10-minute agenda item and add on what's going on. But that's what that coordinator does. That's part of their job. So the model, and that's where we fall short sometimes. We don't follow this full model, and it has those things at number 10. The regular gun screening, the prevention. We call them creamers. I went to a meeting in one place, and they had all these kids and most of them were of color, and they were in this incredible summer program where they were bringing all these like civil rights icons and all these speakers in and talking. But I said, this is the most incredible program. Well, all these kids were already college bound. And the program, of course, their program had success. They were the cream of the crop. They were all the kids who had already navigated everything. I want to support them. I want them down. I want this one down here. I want the leader down here who can take 25 people to the right side or take them to the bad side. And they're down there, and we have people in this town that know who they are, that know who those young leaders are. But we got to work our prevention programming on those youngs, the kids coming back from YDC. Before they revamped the juvenile code in North Carolina in 2011, the recidivism rate coming out of the YDCs, the youth detention centers, was 86%. Almost every kid coming out of there was coming back and getting right back in the system. They changed it because of that. You know, and they've had some dramatic set. They've reduced that number by 20 or 25%. You know, to get sent to YDC, you had to done something really, really bad or done a whole bunch of little things. You get up to the level where they can finally send you to youth detention. Plus, they collapsed it from, you know, they made the policy decision. It better to be at home, really, than in these prisons because they were learning. They were learning areas to bringing knowledge down, and they went from, you know, 3,500 kids incarcerated to really about 500 or 600 right now. But working with every individual that comes back from YDC to this county is a best practice. It worked in High Point for years, and then we stopped doing it. Why? Because it was hard, and we couldn't get enough people to coordinate it. It was really hard, but it can be done. So we want to intervene with those. You saw the generational and the return of the children of the identified violent impact players. We do want to notify. We're talking about some new things. We did a new thing in Orange just a few months ago, not as aggressive. If some of you might have seen the old, you know, was in your face, we're drawing a line in the sand. If you do X, we're going to do Y, blah, blah, blah. We took it, dumbed it down a little bit. Not as many feds, a little calmer, more community, more of a discussion. Had 9 gentlemen appear for that over in Orange County. This was late summer. All 9 of them are getting services right now. That we'd never had a 100% rate. Never. And so instead of talking, we're learning. We're learning how to do this better. We follow up and follow through. We prosecute you. If we tell you you can't have a gun and you have a gun, we're going to prosecute you, and we use you as an example to others and follow through. Then I stole this from David Kennedy, lather, rinse, and repeat. We do it over. We do it over and we get better. So here is the wheel diagram. We start out with our data, and we have our violent offenders, our high value, the people at the bottom of the funnel, and we prioritize our investigations. We go through the DA's office, and we find out, hey, you got some of these guys with pending charges right now. Move them up to the front. The other case really doesn't make that much difference. It's not going to have an impact. We do these screenings. We select some people. You know, it's not unusual for the main guy to be untouchable. He insulates himself. He's smart. These guys are smart. They're businessmen. They're smart. They have incredible ability. If we can turn them, we've got guys all over our district that own homes, have reunited with their families. They have management jobs. You know, they're all over the place if we can just get their attention to slow them down. But we do have to sometimes make a selection on somebody who's shooting people out there. We prosecute aggressively, but we prosecute the right people at the bottom of the funnel based on that objective algorithm. We work like crazy in prison reentry. You already got that going here. We do these notifications in some form or fashion, sometimes maybe at the house, sometimes at the courthouse, whatever we do to put people on notice, because the research is that deterrence works, that these guys don't know what happens when you get caught with a gun. They know Johnny's gone. They just don't know he's in Idaho. in federal prison. And when we let them know the consequences, deterrence works. Yeah, there's a few sociopaths out there. Yes, there's people that enjoy controlling others and showing power and having that control, but that's a minuscule. I've prosecuted thousands and thousands and thousands of people through my career, and there's only been just a handful that are real true sociopaths. Most of them it's circumstance. We make that offer to help. We are accountability and we cooperate between systems. We make referrals. The typical social service agency, I'm on this grant and about 6 months left to go in the grant. I'm looking for the next grant. Now all of a sudden I'm over here working for this grant, right? And we're all of a sudden competing against each other in front of this very board, perhaps sometimes. And so we try to navigate that and find space. And that coordinator works that to find this space where everybody's going to operate so that we can get the most impact. We do some marketing. Some of the stuff that these sheriff's deputies and police officers are doing out there in the community, I hear these stories. They come up, they make a call. The person's heater's not working. They come back the next day, they have some basic, ability to do heating and air, and they fix the person's heater. And they make sure that they have food. Nobody knows. We market that. We start letting the community know. There's a lot of good things going out here as well. There's some bad, but we shouldn't let what happens, in the state of Washington impact some of the good things that are going on here in Durham. We get our social services involved. One of the biggest things that I've seen in our district is the commitment that this board and this county did with Bull City United. To come and put your money where your mouth is and try something different and try to intervene where the fire is burning the hottest. We work on that together, though. We use data to help those folks get the best results. We get our clergy. I found that the megachurch, not so much. He's got 7,000 people he's got to minister to. I like the storefront guy. Got all kind of fire, all kinds of time. He's got a couple little deacons that'll go out there and do anything. We find those people. We help them build. And we do the interventions on emerging offenders. That's what's coming, the kids coming back from YDCs. We're starting to see pathway. The pathway for juveniles used to be joyriding in a vehicle, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle or an auto larceny. We're seeing it. The auto larceny is still a big deal, but it's this breaking in a motor vehicle that seems to be a pathway crime. And so we look at the data for what's going on in Durham County, and we try to identify what kind of interventions can we do? Can we do a target hardening campaign with our lawful gun owners to lock your cars? Because a lot of these guns are coming from vehicles that people leave their doors open. And we work with our probation and our post-release partners. And we try to help them determine who they're going to focus on, who they're going to monitor the most, who are they going to hold accountable the most? The people at the bottom of the funnel. Don't waste your time on this guy who wrote a bad check for his rent that you got on probation. They put him on probation so he could pay that $700. Well, nowadays, $1,400, right? But, we're worried about the shooter. If we're going to go one visit today, let's go visit the shooter's house and make sure he's not shooting. If we're going to give one resource today, let's go to where the shooter lives and give the resource to him. Let's go find out about his kids and see if we can do something to get his kids in school. So here's the structure. We have all kinds of opportunities to link in. We have meetings quarterly where all the other coordinators and the points of contact from probation and law enforcement and sometimes the DA's office come and they exchange best practices. This is what's working. This is how I got the YMCA involved. And in a lot of these things, Goodwill Inc., we forged incredible partnerships with Goodwill. Incredible partnerships. So this strategy can work. I know it can work. I wouldn't waste my time. I know it's worked here before. So I urge you all to let the sheriff lead. When he was chief in Hillsborough, we were running it hard down in Orange County. Easier in Orange County. The numbers aren't so big. Easy in Randolph County. The numbers aren't so big. Here, Greensboro, High Point, Winston, harder. Harder to do. But that means we work harder. So that's my spiel. If you have any questions, I do believe in this, and I know it'll work if we give it the time to work. We have to make a commitment, 12 to 18 months to 2 years. We got to make that commitment that we're going to let this thing take its course and that we follow the full model and that we get the coordination necessary to make it work. So thank you very much. Sorry, I probably talked too long, but I get paid by the word.
Thank you, Rob. That's a lot of information, but as you can see, Mr. Lang is passionate about this. I am passionate about this, and as I said at the outset, this is really all about saving lives. One thing I want you to take away, and then I'll take some questions. This model, this structure, can eliminate the silos that we work in every day here in Durham. Rob said it. We have all the resources. We have all of the pieces. We have a great relationship with the Gudrun and the Criminal Justice Resource Center. Commissioner Jacobs and I have been involved with some great work we've been doing since 2014, 2013. We're doing the work, but we're doing it in silos. Our violent crime numbers are incredible for a city our size. This is all about saving lives and breaking down those silos. This structure can work. So I implore you to give it prayerful consideration. There is an ask. There's a coordinator. There has to be a coordinator. As the sheriff, I want to commit my resources with your assistance to develop that, identify, hire, and get this model moving forward. Questions?
Thank you, Sheriff Burkhead. And Ms. Lang, if you got any more excited and any more energy, we'd have to hold you down. So thank you so much. I get the passion about this. Hearing every day about our children being shot and killed makes no freaking sense. Makes no sense, especially, as you say, when we have the systems, we have the structure, but it's just not coordinated enough that we're saving the lives down here. So I completely get it. I just came back from Chicago, and just even being there, you hearing the shootings, and there was an incident where the whole family was killed in their house, in their home. So this stuff is serious. It's not something that we need to put off and play with. So I hear what your request is, and I am totally on board with whatever we need to do to save the lives of our children. So I'm going to turn it over for commissioners' comments, but I just needed to say that because that's where I live, is how do we save our young people? And PSN was something that I remember it started a long time ago when I was here on the board, and it ended for some reason. But I hear the structure that you have right now, and I think it's something that we need to really jump on board and make sure that we're doing what we need to do. So commissioners, I think I saw Commissioner Burns' hand, and then let's start with Commissioner Burns.
Hey, Sheriff, how you doing? One, welcome. Congratulations on your win. So I know this is the first time you've been in our chambers. I've congratulated you in the public, but I haven't been able to congratulate you here. So welcome, welcome. I do hope you're extending the invitation to other chambers you were denied access to in your first tenure. To God be the glory. Maybe the second time around they'll let you come in and perhaps you can bring Mr. Lang or somebody else. I also wanted to highlight for everybody, this is your first time, out since you were elected. You don't get sworn into tonight. So for everybody who proclaimed that he is not taking responsibility for the violent crime in Durham, touche, sir, touche. I've always believed that you have, and I appreciate it. And thank you so much for your guests. Please extend our congratulations on her 1 year, because we do know how hard she works, along with Dina King and Mike Easley Jr. And we're thankful for the proactive AUSAs that we have. And I second the sentiments of my chair. But I did want to go back, first off and foremost, especially sitting in here with one of my past supervisors who taught me that I can't always send 3 a.m. emails, and I can't always cover everything. I know how hard it is when you take on roles like this and you have a collateral duty. So let me state for the record that I'm in full support of you getting an FTE, and I do hope that our staffs can work together in a professional, collaborative manner and get that done. And that would not negate the FTEs that we need in other areas that also have to help in identifying how we can close the gaps between these silos. Mr. Lang, AUSA Lang, I do want to just highlight, you said a lot, but I think my favorite comment was bring in good data to dedicated, successful, accountable programming. And that's huge for me, because I think when I came on this board, we had to cut a lot of fat, right? There were groups that were continuing to get money that just were not affected. Didn't mean that they didn't care about the community. It's just it wasn't breaking through. Numbers were not going down. So I think we've done some of that. I know that's some work that we can continue to do. I think in working with you two and working with some of the great work that Gudrun's been doing and trying to map out not just our mental health work, but a lot of the work that we do with the criminal justice system, I think that would be helpful. Keeping us in the loop. Sheriff, that's so huge, because I think for us, a lot of times, a lot of our arguments stem from the fact that we have no idea what a lot of these nonprofits are doing. We have absolutely, positively no idea what other, a lot of these criminal justice these purported criminal justice groups do. So if we give you this money, I'm counting on you to keep us in the loop. I see a lot of your folks here. They do a really great job of that. That's not really for you. That's for other people sitting in the audience that run groups in this government and never think it's appropriate to come up here and tell us what it is that they're doing. We got to find out about it in the news. I think the last thing that I want to pop up, you said that you would need 12 to 18 months so that we could see some of the things that, some results. I actually agree with what Mr. Lang said. So for anybody who, if we put this FTE in place, I want folks to recognize this on time. My only big question right now, we keep talking about UNCG, so I recognize that they have the data center. I don't want us to reinvent the wheel, but I'm a local girl, and we have so many great universities here. So what I'm trying to understand is what collaborative work could be done, what monies are available, because if I'm not mistaken, UNCG gets grant funding for that, PSN gets grant funding, and while I'm happy that UNCG does it, and their saw is probably sharpened, I'd be remiss if I didn't think about the local law schools, the local data centers, and the 15 law clinics, 16 or 18 law clinics that NCCU has, and how we can work with UNCG, work with you, so that we can sharpen their saw as well.
We've collaborated with Duke and Central in previous iterations of PSN, so
I would want to see, if you could, some recommendations on how we could solidify some of that. Not to take anything from UNCG, but I do want it to be local, because I feel like a lot of times we leave our universities out of this conversation, and I think they're a pivotal part of it, especially as we work to reduce recidivism numbers. And thank you so much for highlighting that 48.6% of a lot of people that we arrest are juniors. I think our teachers know that. Teachers know who in their classroom, their daddy was the person that caused the problem. I'm going to relinquish my time and give it back to my colleagues. But again, Sheriff, thank you so much for coming in here. Congratulations, and I look forward to that FTE request before budget.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Burns. And as Mr. Lang mentioned, we certainly want to tap into our resources here at North Carolina Central University, Duke University, RTI. UNCG has sort of been the gold standard, and we will certainly build on that. So thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Long.
Thank you so much, Attorney Lane and Sheriff Burkhead, for this presentation. And thank you, Sheriff Burkhead, for also presenting this at our joint city-county. I'm glad we were able to get much more in depth in this conversation today. I think this is a really great program. I only wanted to ask two questions. One was just a clarifying question about the 48.6%. I just wanted to know, because you gave examples, Attorney Lane, about, a father-son dynamic and situation. I just wanted to clarify, is that 48% through that dynamic, or is it just any parent-child relationship has that?
My understanding of the research that I read was that it's any person that goes to prison, their children, almost 1 out of 2 of their kids will become incarcerated.
Thank you so much
Yep.
for that clarification.
No, it's been my experience that as Mr. Lang mentioned, that we see this all the time. In my 38 and a half years of law enforcement, I've had that experience where I arrested dad in the 90s, and now I've arrested the son in 2015, or the daughter. And so it is generational crime. It's very difficult for us to break that cycle. So PSN offers an opportunity to break that cycle, as we mentioned. So that 48% is generational. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, because I wanted to ask that because it is a very daunting percentage and number. And I know, Commissioner Burns has used this anecdote several times about, we need to go work up the stream when we're solving these issues. So I think this is a really good program that'll have the opportunity to do that. And my second question, I know in a joint city-county meeting, you kind of talked about it, but just for more detail here, how would this, because you did present with the chief of police, so how would this relationship work between the chief of police? Who would the position sit under? Would it be under the sheriff's department or under the police department?
The position would sit under the sheriff's office, be managed by my office, but we have to work in partnership with the Durham Police Department, State Probation and Parole, community organization, as we've already mentioned. But the one thing this is hard work, and so there has to be a high-level commitment to ensure the sustainability of this. And I think that the office of the sheriff and myself, we're positioned to sustain this work. So this is why I want to bring it back. Not taking anything away from the great work that Durham Police Department is doing, or any other of our organizations, but as I mentioned a moment ago, we do a lot of that work in silos. So this structure will eliminate those silos, offer sustainability in the office of the sheriff. With your commitment, then we can make this work. So yeah, absolutely.
So we have that position in some places in Cabarrus County. It's in the county. It's under the sheriff. The sheriff does the eval of that position. In other places, that position sits in the district attorney's office. That person coordinates from the DA's office. In other places, it's from a police department. It sort of depends on where your leadership's coming from, and you run to where the leadership's coming from. But that position responds to the executive team, which is across all the leadership agencies. And the hope is that coordinator ends up becoming a spokesperson for that larger body, pretty much the criminal justice system, so they can act and people understand that this person is speaking for this larger body. And those folks learn that they don't speak unless they have authority, but they're typically supervised inside one of the agencies, and the sheriff's department is certainly one of them.
So let me just interject for a second. When you say that, I have some concerns that will that person have any connection to the real people, because that person would be at such a level. Sometimes folks at that level don't really connect to the people that they are supposed to be assisting. So, so can you share a little bit more about how that person would, because when you say that person's up here?
Well, they're up here, they sit with that executive team, but they're bringing it up from the ground. They also work with the frontline programming. They sit in at that meeting at the police department. They sit with an advisory team of social service and agencies, probably, your gang reduction. I mean, they sit on these other committees, and then they bring those issues up to the executive committee, and they all reach consensus about what's our priority here. And There's going to be a little bit, because you have already these boards exist, and so there's going to need to be a little bit of discussion on figure out how it will work.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the answer is yes, and as Attorney Rob Lang just mentioned, it is building, the coordinator will build from the ground up. And so there will be conversations with those who are closest to the issue, closest to the pain.
Absolutely.
Developing those relationships. We're doing some of that right now in my office, where I'm hiring and working with justice-involved individuals. They will be a part of the conversation. The coordinator will just drive the car. And eventually, everything will move up to the executive board. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Commissioner Carter?
Thank you, and thanks very much for this presentation. I don't sit on Joint City County, so I'm thrilled to have an opportunity to listen in depth about all these great ideas. I'll just say, in general, I think it's really important to have a focused strategy. You've brought that forward, and basically every complex social problem we try to solve, we always hear, and I believe it, that the key is coordination of services, many excellent services that we have across agencies. Everybody knows that's what we need to do, and everybody knows it's really hard. And so I'm glad to see that that's a focus here as well, and I believe you when you say it's hard, because I don't think we're doing it well, particularly anywhere yet, or we would be making more headway on our intractable social problems. So Project Safe Neighborhoods has been around for a long time, since 2001 or so, I think. And I just wonder, it's been here so long, and there's so much focus on accountability. Are there any really hard data trends? You didn't really present any to us today. We heard anecdotes that sound good. But have there been any official meta-analyses of all the different individual programs that really show this does work if we sustain the effort and sustain the funding and sustain the collaboration across systems?
Yes, Michigan State has done a tremendous number of analysis of various sites. This thing it's gone to the next level now with training and technical assistance and Bureau of Justice assistance, contracting with various providers. I mean, I'm on a call every month with Mid-Atlantic people that do what I do in about 15 U.S. attorneys' offices, and we talk about training, we talk about assessing our local DA's offices, we talk about the best training available for frontline law enforcement officers, we talk about the best intervention strategies, some of the cutting-edge hospital intervention things going on out of Atlanta and out of Wisconsin. We're talking about all these things, and in my position, in the 12 things we have going on, I'm like, wow, what a better fit than hospital violence intervention than in maybe Durham or Winston-Salem that have a lot of hospitals, and a lot of. But so you have access to this larger evidence-based pool of knowledge of studying that's been going on. I mean, some of the stuff comes out of the south side of Chicago, that these focused interventions improve results. Improve outcomes in a very small neighborhood. So there's plenty of things out there. If you have, I can have UNCG grab it together, but that's why we bring the researcher in, because say, what's the best evidence-based youth program going on? Is there anybody who's done anything in the last 2 or 3 years that's really promising? And they'll look around, well, they're doing this in Kansas, and similar to what the state did when they began the local reentry councils and started reevaluating the way they were dealing with post-release and reentrance into society. They looked at Kansas, they looked at Michigan and Hawaii that were having really successful outcomes in reducing the recidivism rate on people coming back into the system. So there's plenty of that. There's plenty of that about this because it's been analyzed by many, many, many people.
It'd be great if you could send me the paper that does the meta-analysis. If you have that I couldn't find that. I found a lot of individual, empirical analyses of individual studies, and most of them looked positive, I would say. So I would think there would be some larger analysis of all the analyses, and that would just really put some additional fire behind behind this strategy that seems to be really good. And do we know why it ended? You know, the history here seems really strong. Why did Project Safe Neighborhoods end? And do we think the community does feel good about it? You know, you said it's community engagement's really important. I just wonder, has this been discussed with the community in some formal way through the PACs or anything else? And just, I don't know if there were, you know, political underpinnings to why it ended, and if so, that we can just drop it. But you know, I didn't know if there was some other.
Well, I think at the very outset, it's hard work. And if the commitment is not there and the resources are not afforded, then it tends to fall by the wayside. Now, I can't speak. I wasn't intimately involved 20 years ago when it was here in Durham. As Rob mentioned, we ran a program in Orange County when I was the chief there in Hillsborough. Gudrun may have more insight as to why it sort of fizzled out here in Durham. So I'll defer to Gudrun. She's stepping up to the mic.
We do a lot of start and stops, don't we? Stop, start sometimes.
Yeah, unfortunately we do. And to be honest, that's exactly why I want to bring it back as the sheriff. I'm not going anywhere, at least for the next 4 years. And it really takes a commitment and resources from a leader,
right,
from a board, to make this work. And our community, again, we have to drag people sometimes kicking and screaming, but again, this is about saving lives, and I think the commitment that we demonstrate here today and moving forward, hopefully will fuel that sustainability, will fuel that passion. Your point about empirical data is spot on. We can get that. On average, 13% reduction in violent crime in every jurisdiction that's employed PSN. That's the low end. So this works. But anyway, Gudrun.
Good morning, Commissioners. As the Sheriff mentioned, we had PSN in Durham, the position set in the Durham Police Department. There were actually 3 positions initially, and the PSN coordinator, essentially leadership changed and the commitment to PSN or the belief in PSN changed. And so, and then there was some mission creep with the position was then utilized for other purposes and PSN, and there was a decision made to stop PSN and the notifications.
Well, that's helpful. And, you know, it does matter if you have someone driving it and if they're focused on that and there's not the mission creep. So, all right, this is very helpful. And just one final thing, and this is not really about Project Safe Neighborhoods, but it surely does seem like it would help Project Safe Neighborhoods. And it's about a local ordinance that we used to have for gun registration that involved the collection of a serial number. And there was an article recently in the News and Observer about this, and we used to have this in Durham, and it stopped in 2014 or something like that. And the article really highlighted how both gun owners, you know, advocates for guns, like the idea of having this because then they can track down their gosh darn lost guns that get stolen. And people who are concerned about gun safety, you know, and who are concerned about gun violence and the prevalence of guns are in favor of it too. We put something like this on our legislative agenda, wondering, you know, if you guys like that idea of having something like that, and is it something we should start really trying to champion the heck out of?
I have all sorts of personal views. You know, I'm a represent the Department of Justice, and you know, so I'm not. That's a local matter. You know, and you know, one of our biggest partners in the first iteration of PSN here was Mothers Against Gun Violence. You know, and they were very involved and helped us frame some of the discussion, you know, and so that we, you know, we're looking to build partners, not run people away. So that's a hot button issue.
Yeah.
And
but it is popular, according to this article anyway, with both sides, right?
Right.
I think most of us are clearly on one side of this, you know, debate. But just, it's common sense gun safety, really. Just common sense gun use here, and trying to get the guns out of the hands of the people they don't belong to. And if we had serial numbers, we could track it. Seems like it would help.
Well, Commissioner Carter, I appreciate your bringing that up. And you're right, it's common sense, but not everyone agrees. You all have heard me say I support responsible gun ownership. I support responsible gun legislation. I also support the Second Amendment, but we know that too many guns end up in the wrong hands. And we know that people own weapons and they don't secure them properly. Registration takes place at the federal level already. I manage the pistol permits and gun permits and background checks and all that in my office already. Gun sales are registered at the federal level. So bringing back such a program at the local level certainly would be a decision made by this body, which I could support.
Do you think we have the authority?
You'd have to ask her.
We'll look more into it, but
I think it's worthy of a conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's worthy of a conversation.
Okay, great. Thank you for all the information, all the hard work, and the focus on this.
Jacobs?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Rob. I have listened to you now for about 6 years, speaking so passionately about this issue, and I have been a supporter of your vision personally for a long time. And so I'm really excited that we're here at this moment. I think that what has been alluded to is that what takes this model working is that people have to be committed to it. And I'm glad to hear that it seems like we finally have all of the critical partners at the table, because it cannot succeed, as Gudrun was explaining, unless everybody is on board. And frankly, a key partner for this is the district attorney's office. This program cannot succeed without the partnership and the support of the DA's office. So I'm really glad to hear that the U.S. Attorney and our DA are working together closely on this. And I think the model has to be followed, and the MOUs are really critical, that every partner is doing what they say they're going to do, and everyone is being held accountable. With the level of gun violence in our community and the trauma that inflicts on families, on everybody, on neighborhoods, we have to be using every tool in our toolbox. We have to be doing everything that we can do. And we know we have not been doing this. So I fully support this. I just have a few follow-up questions. I know that at Joint City County, we were talking about the position being a jointly funded position between the city and the county. I do think there's value in that approach, because I think it's important that everyone has skin in the game. So I hope that we will pursue that for that very reason, that partnership. I also hope that you will present this to the school board. The schools are a very important partner in this. When we look at the data and look at the histories, we see that this starts with behavior that is identified within the classroom with teachers, and the schools have to be a partner. We have to make sure that the schools have the resources to help when we see behavioral, emotional issues, families that need whatever they need, that we are intervening as early as possible. And that's what the gang reduction report tells us. So, so please include Durham Public Schools and their leadership. The other thing, I wanted to mention that we are continuing to make investments. We have a new department. Rob, you might not know, our community intervention and support services that is now pulling together our My Brother's Keeper, Project Build, Bull City United, our gang prevention programs, but also it seems like that would be really important for PSN to be tied in with that work as well. And this is something that came up at the joint city-county meeting, which is it seems like the coordinator is obviously critical for implementing the model, but I would like to hear from you, Rob, about where you see other places. It seems like there really also needs to be another position, at least, helping to, with the connection of resources, the wraparound services, the coordination within the community, and with, because that's what I worry about. I think the hard part is really following through with that family, with that child, with that youth, and making sure that it is ongoing. They get the support, they get the mentoring, and or whatever. But so I just wonder, are there other? Is that part of the model, the case management and the connection to resources?
So in High Point and Winston, and as the way I see it develop, Greensboro's position is open. The fellow just resigned. They're in a hiring process. But they have a community outreach person, and then they have this coordination person, and they sort of work together. And inside the command structure, it's under the same assistant chief. They're under CID, really, is where they are. So in High Point, they have a coordinator that's a civilian that's inside the police department, and a point of contact that's a law enforcement officer that does sort of the more law enforcement stuff, but they work together. And they actually have a third person that runs a community against violence, the High Point Community Against Violence, which is pure community. They facilitate meetings every month, very similar to things you have going on here already, but so some of these places have 2 and 3 people that are doing this, but in the smaller places, we have part-time coordinators, and they help the other agencies focus. Not to say that mental health wouldn't give mental health services to everybody who qualified, but prioritizing getting a person an appointment on Wednesday instead of 4 weeks from Wednesday because they're on this list. So a case manager, would be helpful, but it's trying to build a referral network from this strategy based on the data and prioritizing in each agency and letting them do what they already do, but having them all in the fold up at the top at the executive level, understanding that we've all made a commitment to work on this violence, and we think that this right here is going to help that. So, yes, you could use another person to help facilitate it, especially in a city, in the 3rd largest city of the state or 4th largest city in the state, but that's not absolutely necessary if you have a really motivated coordinator that's got a good skill set that can build trust. And so you're trying to do it. You're trying to identify that point of contact inside all those agencies so you can make the referral to them. But I understand what you're saying. And you could use 10 people, you could use a mentor coordinator. You could use all kinds of things. But I think that this community is so rich in that, bringing those other entities in would be the primary job of the coordinator.
Commissioner Jacobs, thank you for that. And I'll just echo what Rob has said. And you're right. It can be a heavy lift. So identifying the coordinator, director, and then identifying an assistant. But here, I think we have the pieces in place, whether we're going to tap into the Criminal Justice Resource Center, Duke University, New Durham Vision with former Chief Chalmers and the group that's working closely with those justice-involved individuals now. They now have 10 or 15 individuals on staff, so there's another point of contact and connectivity where, again, everyone is pulling the bus in the same direction. and the PSN director coordinator is out front alongside those other individuals. So, but having someone to sit alongside to make sure we collect the data, to make sure we offer the peer support, to make sure we coordinate the meetings certainly would be spot on in moving this forward. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And I just one last comment related to Commissioner Carter's last point, and I support us looking into that. So hopefully we can follow up with our county attorney's office and find out what we need to do. But I also want to just also let the board know I have requested that our gun safety team from public health come and present to our board. I think they're going to come in February for this very reason of what you mentioned, Sheriff, about all of the guns that are being taken out of vehicles, because we have the staff here who have some ideas and they have solutions, and this is a public health issue, and there are things that we can do. And I know that Donna Rosser, who is the head of that in public health, has asked if she and their team can come and share their ideas, and I hope that we'll support that as well. Thank you.
Okay. Nothing else. I just want to end with this comment. You know, when we talk about the people at this level, we're talking about poverty. The bottom line is it's poverty. And poverty has to do with housing. It has to do with food. It has to do with everything that makes people whole. And if we're not connecting people to resources that can shift the dynamics of their lives, all this other stuff that we do won't make a difference, because people are going to get what they need however they need to get it. No matter if they have to take it from me or take it from you or whatever, they're going to get it. So if we're not working to connect people to resources so that they get jobs and housing, we are wasting our time. So I'm glad you mentioned Chalmers, because his program, his whole programs that he's putting together will be connecting folks to jobs, and housing is such a key element for people that are in, especially in that arena, because they don't feel that they've ever been paid any attention to or ever been addressed what they want. So we have to address those areas.
Chair Howerton, you're absolutely correct. That's the intervention of PSN. So it's like the carrot and the stick. We're gonna bring you in and offer you these resources: the education, housing, job training, soft skills, mental health, all of it. And it's up to you to receive it. But that's the intervention piece. You're absolutely correct. Okay. That's where we've seen the biggest difference, where we take someone out of a life of crime and we give them an opportunity, give them a second chance to be successful in another arena and not commit crime. And that's where we make a difference in people's lives.
Okay. Thank you so much. There's anything else for the board? Well, thank you both. Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you for your work. This is, as you say, hard work.
It is indeed.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so commissioners, we've got, let's see, it's 5 after 11. So you want to get started? We may have to break at 11:45, but do you want us to go ahead and start? What are you saying? I can't hear. No, I was asking Claudia what was to be her preference, because we may have to stop at 11:45, and she can go ahead and get started, and then we'll take a lunch and then come back and finish.
Do we need to stop?
There's nothing after Claudia's presentation, but there's a conference call set up at 11:45 that several of us have to be on. And we discussed that at the prep, and we need to take that conference call and then come back and finish, because I don't think, if you think you can finish in 45, and you can finish? If you can finish, that'd be great. Okay. I mean, if that's enough time for
I believe
you,
in y'all.
I think that lies in our hands.
that'd be great for, as far as I'm
Okay,
concerned.
great. Good morning, everyone. I trust you're well, and it's great that we're at this stage of conversation about the American Rescue Plan Act funding. We've had ongoing conversations for some time, and the strategies that the board has outlaid has gotten us to a good place. We'll go through. Thank you. We'll have a quick recap of the funding. I'll talk about the RFP process, talk about potential interlocal agreements with the city of Durham, have some board discussion. This is a continuation conversation from your board planning retreat, so we can move pretty quickly. And as it relates to recommendations, this is just to share that we've made some, with the expectation that you will spend time through the week looking at information that we will send to you electronically and make available and through hard copy. Okay, I first want to acknowledge some colleagues. This process, and I've talked with other colleagues in other places that are working on ARPA. This is a fantastic transformative investment. Because these are federal dollars, there's lots involved with it. And I just want to give a lot of appreciation to folks in several areas, including our county manager's office, the budget office, and finance team, and the county attorney's office. And some folks could come, some are watching online, but to acknowledge Anna Hawksworth, Crystal Lee Wright, Shannon Wright, C.G. Garner, Ella Henderson, and attorney Curtis Massey. And we also have a consultant that helps on occasion, and who is Lita Peterson. And so those that are here, if you can stand, and I'd just like to give you a round of applause and claps. I also thank Susan Tezai and Keith for their team members, allowing them, sharing them with me as needed through many hours of the day in waves, but just always want to give that acknowledgement. Just quick recaps, the dollars for ARP must be incurred or obligated by December 31st, 2024. That means you must have a contract for it, okay? Doesn't mean you have to spend it all, but you need to have a good plan. So that means between now and to the end of the year, as we've done with all of our federal dollars, we will continue to reallocate and move to align with those dates. We did that with CARES, if you may recall. We did it with some of the other funding that came through with the state. So it's not anything different, just a much bigger number. All the funds must be expended to cover obligations and work completed by December 31st, 2026. The board were established guiding principles and highlights on how to use the funds back in June 2021. This was prior to Treasury giving final guidelines on how to use the ARPA dollars, but quick highlights, prioritization for board strategies and projects that they had already endorsed, leveraging ARPA funds to align with other federal and state and local community dollars to optimize those, prioritization to dollars that address equity issues and health disparities, closing achievement gaps, infrastructure support to unincorporated areas, and funding to support other types of minority businesses. evaluate the infrastructure needs to address compliance, increase workloads resulted with COVID. I won't go through all of these, but these sort of guiding principles were established, and as we move towards the board's adoption of the plan in May of earlier this year, that really served as the foundation. So thank you for your great work with that. There are 6 key areas that the dollars can be used in: the public health response, public sector revenue loss, water and sewer infrastructure to address negative impacts of the economy, premium pay for essential workers, and the broadband infrastructure. With time, Treasury has refined how entities can use those dollars, and we are excited that in some spaces they've allowed even more flexibility, which is helpful. We always bump up against what the federal government allows and then what do our general statutes allow. So there are some areas that folks may compare, well, in Kansas they do X, but our general statute doesn't allow that. So we do have those areas we've worked through, but we are very grateful that there are lots of spaces that we can use the funds. The dollars in your plan aligned, of course, with the allocation, with funds segmented into different categories: community empowerment, enrichment, and our health and well-being for all, safe community, and environmental stewardship, and accountable, efficient, and visionary government. And as I said, this just reminded me of my colleagues who have helped so much in the review process, the general managers, as we've gone through review. I was going to acknowledge them as well. Most of the general managers were involved in serving on one of the teams. So we had our most senior leadership along with others who have been part of the evaluation process as we looked at the applications. In addition, in the plan to allocating funds for various categories using ARPA dollars, we also outlined potential places that we could use fund reserves to support priority areas. And we'll have additional conversations about that in January. I know our CFO has presented to the board a strategy in how we consider use for our fund balances, and these are areas that we will also come back to speak to the board about. One of the bullets that was on your guiding principle and is a best practice is using the other dollar first. And so what we've done is try to optimize using other state grant dollars that have come through, or federal dollars, and have reserved our precious ARPA dollars as much as we could. So early on, you may recall, we may have said we would use dollars for to support housing, temporary housing. At the time, FEMA allowed for reimbursement for those, so those were applied for FEMA. There were other times when we may have budgeted dollars. We had planned to use ARPA for activities, but then the state allocated money, so that meant that we didn't have to use that. So we've been fortunate. There's been this infusion of resources, and those dollars will continue. So we will do the shuffle game as we move towards the 2024 deadline. But again, have strategies to make sure no dollar is left unspent. There's a request for proposal out right now for broadband, and we talked about that at a conversation with the board. And we'll not go into those details. The state is expected to make some additional announcements with the Great Grant Award. It's been moved from the December timeframe to a little bit later, so we've moved our RFP accordingly. And of course, we have the community grants, which are the areas we'll talk about right now. Back in August, we asked the community to present proposals for potential areas to use ARPA funds in 7 different categories. The first 2 were related to our desires to be leaders in the state and nation in how we prepare our children for K-12 education through investments through early childhood education. The first one is related to capacity building and technical assistance for child care at $1.6 million. The second for expanding access to affordable child care at $12 million. Improving child and family, social, emotional, and mental health with two different categories. One at for the 0 to 12 age group, and we broke it up into 13 to 24. Youth enrichment and recreational activities was $1.5 million, and capacity building for culturally affirming maternal health support, prior the board has had for some time. And then the last one for crime intervention initiatives. You will note that there were only two. The first two had larger targets for allocations. The remaining categories had smaller levels that we were targeting to fund. And although these were ranges, some, as you will note, applications may have blended between categories. So when you see the final numbers, it's not a clean mix between one or the other, but we stay within the $10.4 million. There was a rubric that was developed, and we've shared this information. This was started some time ago, looking at best practices and models at other jurisdictions across the country. Of course, eligibility and compliance were priorities. Can the entity move forward and achieve those proposed goals based on past experiences and financial health? Does the project align with the board's priorities? And because we had targeted areas in which the funds were spent, all the projects, all the proposals got the highest level for those. And then complexity. Is it a complex project from the standpoint for this interpretation? Can they get started pretty quickly? Doesn't mean it's a bad thing if they can't, but if there's a 12-month ramping up period and we're delivering services, and it's a longer period to start when we're looking at the benchmark that will be used, sort of return on investment, number of people served, et cetera. If it's a ramping up period, we had to balance, well, how many projects can we support in that type of scenario? So we did look to see how complex it was moving forward with starting. If it was community building, benefiting, the collaboration components that were involved with other stakeholders, the equity lens and how the project impacted the community, as well as evidence of sustainability. If an entity had never managed a $400 million project and their cash flows show their budgets with around $20,000, that may not necessarily for this type of funding be a scenario that we were willing to support. So there were some that didn't have large balances in the past, but we did move forward them. But again, from a macro level, looking at what's the mix that we can do, and from an equity perspective, because for businesses that had, or nonprofits that had the infrastructure for some time, of course they will have a longer and stronger history. So we did look at the evidence of sustainability, environmental sustainability, and the last one, performance evaluation, which is most important in an area that Treasury will delve into most carefully when trying to determine the dollars and how they were used. This print is very small, and we'll upload these again into the system, but we had lots of FAQs that we shared with the nonprofits to help as they completed their work. We also showed the example of the risk assessment tool that we must complete and that we will be audited on to determine did we check off all these lists. And so again, if a nonprofit, for instance, doesn't meet the threshold in some areas, that means that we will have to have additional supports around that entity, and the timing of how the funding happens is slightly different. Those are all areas that we had to work through. And looking at the rubric, there are some example questions that were sort of prompts as we look through rating the various entities, and will not go through those, but did want to share that as an example. Real quickly, there were 76 applicants, and we did have a combination of staff as well as external subject matter experts. The system looked at the approaches on how the funds would be used, organizational capacity, project complexity, equity, fiscal management capacity, and project sustainability after the funding was gone. Contracts will be scheduled to begin January 2023 and end in December 31st, 2024. So we are hopeful the board at your next meeting can vote on these projects. The next one is that the county will bolster infrastructure to support the nonprofit entities. We are in conversations with one nonprofit, and that will help us with some of the grant and contract management. This does require more reporting than most situations, and some nonprofits may not necessarily have the administrative infrastructure to support some of those areas. And because we were committed to making sure we help build the infrastructure in our nonprofit community, we find that it's important that we put systems and structure around for success. So I said all that to say, because one of my first jobs, I worked with the North Carolina Partnership for Children, and I helped nonprofits with their reporting, board relations, et cetera. But a lot of times, nonprofits may not necessarily have the support in-house, and they may not have the budgets, et cetera. And so for projects that we do move forward with, we want to make sure that the systems are around and structure are around them to do well. And whether we use county dollars or ARPA dollars to do that support, we're committed to making sure that everyone is successful. Because it's a reflection of all of us. And if we're trying to build capacity, we want our nonprofits to be even stronger on the other side of that December 31st, 2024 date, so they can become even more competitive when seeking other funds. Now for the categories, and if I push the right button, the recommendations. We recommended that we move forward with 52 proposals, which total almost $10.4 million. And I'll go through our slides to just sort of show what those are. For capacity building and technical assistance, we were looking for proposals that could provide technical assistance and help child care sites strengthen their business practices as they were recovering from financial loss from the pandemic, as well as looking at other approaches in training to help formally and informally child care providers. The proposals that supported family care homes, child care homes, sites for infant and toddler care, and other sites were focused areas that we were excited to receive proposals in. Child Care Services Association received their full project amount based on their activities that they're currently doing in this environment. They are the technical assistance provider for child care services. We also funded Built to Last Innovations Lab. There were some components within their proposals that was unique and we felt would serve the community well as we move to build our child care infrastructure, child care centers, and our efforts in how we support our children are most important when thinking about long-term economic development and ensuring our children are ready for K-12. Next, the expanding access to affordable childcare. We were requesting providers that could expand access to affordable childcare for children 0 to 5 through financial assistance or scholarships, and so they will help to facilitate the management of our grants for providers. And Child Care Services Association does that for many jurisdictions, and we selected them. There was also a proposal from Families Moving Forward that was funded in an effort from an equity perspective to build capacity, but also to expand in a unique area that they were targeting. Category 3, improving child and family social, emotional, and mental health for children ages 0 to 5. The proposals focused on projects that could expand trauma-informed supports for families. There was the desire for the promotion of social, emotional, and mental health and positive childhood experiences on strengthening protective factors from adverse childhood experiences. The applicants should have been current providers of these services, and we also welcome partnerships because there were some unique approaches that were presented. There were 10 providers that we selected. Those include the Children's Family Home Society of North Carolina, the Durham Public Schools Foundation, Durham's Partnership for Children, Exchange Family Center, Reach Out and Read, North Carolina Refugee Community Partnership, the Young Men's Christian Association of the Triangle of, that's YMCA, and the Triangle, Triangle Area Parental Support, Parenting Support, Voices Together, and Village of Wisdom. So we had a very wide range of providers that we are partnering with, some with longer histories and others with histories in the community, but this will help bolster some expanded efforts, so we're excited for those. Next, we identified dollars for the categories for youth ages 13 to 25, also addressing social and emotional and mental health support systems. We funded for this particular one 10 providers, including Durham Public Schools Foundation, Durham Crisis Response Center, El Futuro, Emily K. Center, Planned Parenthood South Atlantic, Student U, the Center for Home Ownership and Economic Development, the LBGTQ Center of Durham. No, I'm sorry, that is correct. And the Triangle East 100 Black Men, and the Youth Mentoring Collaborative. It's important to note that for some of these partnerships that we have identified, we will have to refine some of their scopes. We identify areas where there may have been duplication, or we felt that the emphasis could be in another area that was needed. We are excited again for the selected entities, and I'll move to the next category, the youth enrichment and recreational activities. We had some of the largest number of applicants in this particular category. The RFP sought proposals that enhance academic opportunities and general well-being for youth in Durham, as well as looked at enrichment through recreation as well. And so it was very broad. So we received some enrichment activities submissions, as well as some that were recreational or sports related. There were 17 applicants that were selected. And the list include the Association of Preservation of the Eno River Valley, Bike Durham, Book Harvest, Bump the Triangle, the City of Durham Parks and Recreation Department, Durham Success Summit, and Empower Dance Foundation. The next include Kids Notes, Museum of Life and Science, North Carolina Arts in Action, Planned Parenthood South Atlantic. Okay. Yeah, I'm not, y'all see I don't have my glasses, I'm sorry. And the St. Joseph's Historic Foundation, Student Youth, Swing Pals, and Bull City Woodshop. I'm sorry, not Swing Pals and World Relief Durham. Okay. Next, there were dollars allocated for capacity building for culturally affirming maternal health support. The proposals were requested in several areas by several entities. We funded 6. The proposals sought to provide universal supports for maternal health as well as address Black maternal health specifically, although proposals addressed all maternal health as well. Supports can include the financial assistance, provision of essential family supplies, the full spectrum of doula care, lactation support, group or individual peer support, education, and resource navigation. And I know this has been a board priority for some period, and we're excited to move forward several proposals. With these entities, they are partnering, as with some of our nonprofit organizations, with a fiscal agent, because many of them are smaller. And Triangle United Way is also facilitating a grant that will also involve several of these entities as well. And finally, there were several proposals submitted specifically for the crime intervention initiatives. And these proposals looked at approaches that would contribute to community safety and combat crime through culturally affirming support systems. The funding could be used for conflict resolution, violence prevention, domestic violence prevention, health and wellness, and critical time interventions. The applicants had to be current providers of community support groups, and partnerships were also welcome. We funded 4 entities, included the Durham Crisis Response Center, Communities in Partnership, Triangle Literacy Council, and the Durham County Teen Court and Restitution. So that is an overview of the information on the different nonprofits that are selected. Now, you, as you read this, you will note there are some that you wondered, well, why weren't they funded? Sometimes in looking at the proposals, for instance, there's one for the Hayti project. We will be using local dollars for them in a major way, so they did not get the ARPA funds, as well as the timing of project implementation. And then there are others that, based on their proposal, they were not as strong in how they stated that they would reach targets. So there are lots of different reasons, but we stand behind our process. And unfortunately, we just did not have enough money for everyone, as well as the timing of how the dollars had to be spent. We are asking the board approve these recommendations at the 12th meeting. Upon approval, we'll communicate and coordinate with the nonprofits to see if they will accept the dollars or would like to continue moving forward. Things may have changed once they see all the requirements that are involved, et cetera. We'll finalize the contracts for them to begin January. And we will also, as I talked about infrastructure, firm up real quick that infrastructure, because as we move forward today, we can right now know how many nonprofits will need some assistance. And so we will, as early as next week's meeting, bring forth a contract for a firm to help because we need our staff as well as the nonprofits to get the kind of support that they need. And right now we've been sort of working fourth shift, if there is such a thing, to make things move forward. Okay, so that's the quick overview on the nonprofit selections. I'll give I have a few more slides. There are some proposed projects that we're suggesting we move forward with that are joint with the city. Some related to digital equity through their RFP process. They identified partners in that, and we are suggesting to move forward with that project. The city would manage those processes. And then the culture and arts investment, that's there with the Durham Arts Council. And we've been talking about this for some time. There are other areas that we're recommending the board consider, including expanding funding to address learning loss investments, leveraging existing infrastructure. The World Health Center, I know we've quoted this before, spoke about in an article several months ago, just the impact of this learning loss and the economics that it brings longer term for our youth across the world. And so we want continued conversations to happen with the board and present some joint funding for projects, as well as looking at bolstering youth enrichment and recreation-focused investments. Also, we would like we will bring forward some joint proposals related to crime interventions and investments, as well as bring forth and continued conversations that the board's had around housing insecurity, especially with some emphasis on reentry housing, which is something that the sheriff just spoke about as well, and that gap there. And last, and this is a priority we've had, but one that also elevated during the planning retreat. We've been in some conversations about where the city and county can partner to move forward projects related to affordable housing, permanent affordable housing. The city's had a few projects and RFPs that have some gaps in funding, and so we're just recommending to the board to consider those so that we can, if possible, move the capacity level for additional affordable housing to a higher number than where we are. And so next steps, a recap again, the board to vote on the ARPA grant recommendations. Staff will continue to vet jointly funded ILAs with the city of Durham. And I would also like to say I appreciate the partnerships that we've been fostering, as we always do with the city. I know they're listening. We talk frequently about ARPA, and we've shared resources. So grateful to Deputy City Manager Bertha for her efforts in helping us collaborate. We will also have updates on county department facilitated community initiatives and RFPs. There are some areas such as food security and food efforts that I know the board desires to move forward in. We on our, planning, we looked at potentially using local dollars for that when we first crafted it. We've already allocated some in the current budget using ARPA dollars, but I know that's one priority. There are some additional youth serving type efforts from Cooperative Extension, as well as the library. The library has dollars that were set aside as well. We plan to continue these refined conversations about how the dollars will be used. As a reminder, we do have until the 31st of 2024 to December 31st, 2024 to have everything encumbered. Our intent is to refine everything by March 23. So as we move and shuffle because this will be at a very aggressive process. So if folks aren't spending their money by a certain time or meeting targets, we will have to claw back that money, basically saying deauthorize projects and shift it to someplace else so that we don't lose those dollars. So we will do all we can to make sure entities are successful. But just like with county projects, we've had to do some shuffling. And so our intent is to make sure that no dollars left on the table, which it will not be. So that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Claudia, for a wonderful presentation. I have a question for the board. Will you be able to get your questions and concerns answered by the 12th to be able to vote on this? Just back and forth questions with staff? Okay, so the other question, I just had one question today, Claudia, and then I'll hold my questions for back and forth with you. On page 8, the number of proposals funded, is that 2 different organizations, or is that just one organization?
Okay, yes, that's a great question. So that could be the potential of 2 organizations. So for instance, so we funded 51 proposals, but there are a couple of nonprofits that that were funded in 2 different categories. For instance, the Durham Crisis Response Center, Durham Public Schools Foundation. So what we'll do, we'll refine that number so it will say X number of nonprofits funded, so that we'll add that as a bullet.
So that says capacity building and technical assistance for childcare. So that would be 2 different organizations
Yes,
that
ma'am.
are funded.
Yes, ma'am. And so 2 different organizations, but if using that same example, let me go back to that slide. So you will note that Child Care Services Association was funded in the first one, which we would expect, as well as they were also funded in the second one as well.
Okay, all right.
Yes, ma'am.
That gives me some clarification there, thank you.
So, but that's a great question. We'll also give a sheet to show which ones.
Okay, so are there other questions that, let's see, it's 11:45. Thank you. I'm just trying to figure out if we need to get on the call or not.
I just have one quick
go ahead.
question to help for
Yeah.
the 12th vote.
I can't hear you.
I just had one quick question or a favor to ask of staff.
Sure.
Let Heidi finish what she was saying. That's okay. Yeah. Are you okay with that? Okay.
I'm just wondering, I really like this. Thank you
Yes.
for providing this detail. Can you provide the Excel format so we can sort it by?
Yes, we will do all of that and make it user-friendly. We have 12,000 versions. And so for this today, I just wanted it real simple, but we'll sort it and have the recommended amount. And we'll give you the Excel version as well.
Okay. And
Yeah.
can you send us, did you have rubrics when staff were deciding which ones to
Yes.
fund? So
Yep.
share that so we can see the decision. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Now, can I go, Madam Chair? I'll be quick. We'll take that as a yes. I just want to say this has been worth the wait. I feel a lot of excitement for this for a number of reasons. First of all, the process is amazing. It seems incredibly rigorous. The time investment of our staff, it's clear from all of the elements and the ways in which this has been analyzed that it's been a huge investment. It almost feels like, a whole other department is almost needed to be a grants administrator for this. Mm-hmm. And I know some counties actually are hiring that out, like the TJ Cog, for example. But I just wanted to really lift y'all up for that. Love the partnership with the city. I love the way I think you've really aligned with this board's priorities. So those are just a few of my, words of praise. One question would be, what about county department proposed projects? That's coming later, I think.
Yes, so we will bring those. There are a few that we will bring forth in January, and most of them know that based on the amount, we can't bring them all. So, but there will be a few that will work with the manager to come forth in January.
So, and the staff, Claudia and your staff has done such a great job, and I hate rushing here.
No problem.
And just, that's why I wanted to move it to the afternoon so that you'd have all the time that you needed to do this. But sounds like you would at this point. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn it over to the vice chair and let her proceed with whatever needs to happen from this point. Agenda prep. Are we available to be here after we finish this conference call to do agenda prep? The ones that have to be here. So you can have lunch, and we can do agenda prep in about 45 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to the vice chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Burns, do you have any?
I literally was going to make a motion to adjourn. I don't know what I'm being asked, so you can go ahead, Madam Chair.
Okay, I just wanted to say thank you to you, Claudia, and to everyone who's worked on this. I know there's been huge staff involvement, teams of people who have evaluated all of these proposals. I think this has been an outstanding process. You've created a fantastic model, just to echo Commissioner Carter's comments. And from my experience, where we are now with making decisions like this, we have such a better process because it needs to be based on the professional opinion of our staff and also a rubric and a rigorous decision-making process, and that has been put into place. And so I really respect the recommendations here. I'm excited to vote on this at our next meeting. This is amazing that we have so many organizations that are going to be funded, and I'm so excited about what is going to happen and all the resources that are going to be available to our community. This is a once-in-a-lifetime experience to have this kind of money coming into our community. I think we all know that. And I guess we did discuss this last night, Claudia, but if you could talk about how the information will be shared with the community and how the grants will be tracked, because I think that's a really important part.
We will post information on our website, and that's one of the sort of requirements with Treasury. And now that we are at a point of increased activity, we will make that even more robust so that folks can see what's happening and the timing of projects, et cetera.
Great. So that'll be on the ARPA website
That's
you've already
correct.
created. Okay.
Yes,
great.
and we will do some things to improve its current aesthetics.
Okay, wonderful. And the other thing I just wanted to say is that I think we are really tracking really well with the guidelines that we all agreed on, and that you have helped us create the buckets of money that we said we were going to focus on. So I look forward to the next phase, which is some of the ones that we haven't addressed yet, and how much money do we have left. And I'm really glad we are going to then focus on the housing, and I know we don't have to talk about this now, but I know you're going to bring back to us after the new year input on that, and I do think I'm excited about shovel-ready projects, but I also do want to focus on the areas of housing that I think are key for the success of all the different programs and services that we provide in Durham County government. and what we've identified through things like the intercept map updating, and I know the work that Gudrun and I have been doing with the Familiar Faces Initiative, how we need the reentry housing, we need the permanent supportive housing, the transitional housing for people with substance use, mental health issues. We know we need to keep seniors housed. So some of the things that I think are very particular to the ecosystem that we work with in Durham County government. And I'll stop there and see, again, I don't know if Commissioner Burns, any?
I'm grown. I don't have any, and that's no disrespect to you. It's about respect of time. I echo my colleagues' sentiments, but this was sent out this weekend, so I asked my questions this weekend. I got them answered, so I don't have nothing to say.
Okay. So our next steps then is that you're going to give us information. We're going to get our questions answered further, and we're going to vote, take this up for a vote at our Monday night meeting. Okay? Anything else you need from us?
No, thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much. So if that's it, then I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Move, Vice Chair.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Burns, seconded by Commissioner Alam, with a roll call voice vote.
Commissioner Long,
Aye.
Commissioner Burns,
Aye.
Commissioner Carter,
Aye.
and Vice Chair Jacobs.
Aye. We are unanimously adjourned.